8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to Optimism Vaccine. I'm Steve, and joining me, I got Adam Myros here. Myros, how you doing, man?
Boy, I'm pretty exhausted, Steve. I got to tell you, a lot of high energy schlock this week.
Are you somehow more exhausted than the 1985 Oscars? Is that really how you're feeling right now?
Well, that was a long time ago. It's hard for me to really quantify how exhausted I was that many years back, Steve.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, and really since then, God, it's been, what has it been, 35 years now? And I don't know if I've ever been more exhausted than I was after watching Out of Africa, but that seems like a lifetime ago. So also joining us, former veteran from the mid-'80s days of Optimism Vaccine, Jack Easton's here.
Yeah, doing well, Steve. Looking at my investment portfolio, glad I got in early on that little company called Apple.
Smart move, man. I was like, remember when I gave you that tip in 96? I was like, Google, man, search engines are the future. And you didn't believe me at first.
Yeah, I thought your tip in 96 was to just watch Space Jam a lot.
Yeah, that was kind of my backup plan because I figured like Space Jam would kind of shape the future of cinema as we know it. And certainly that prediction has come true as well. I also told you to double down on your Lycos investments, but much like their dog mascot, that site died a long time ago. So RIP. Also joining us on this Mortal Monday, we've got resident fucking nerd, Colin's here. Colin, how you doing, man?
I believe this podcast will result in our world's final destruction. Have a nice day. There you go. Now you know that I actually play the games.
Oh, that's good.
There's someone out there that's like, oh, I get the reference. And in case you don't get the reference, that's the ending from Mortal Kombat 1. If you won is right, and he just destroys the world.
If you don't get the reference, feel free to send us an email, optimismvaccine@gmail.com, and you can tell Colin what sex is like when you have it. Okay, so in case you didn't, realize it is Mortal Monday. We are in fact talking about the new Mortal Kombat movie, and in true hack podcast fashion, because I'm sure there's a couple other ones doing this. We're going to tell you all about the other Mortal Kombat movies, which turned out to be a more daunting project than I initially thought it would be, because in my head, there's MK95, there's Mortal Kombat Annihilation, there's a large gap of time, and then there is Mortal Kombat Reboot 2021. But boy, howdy, is there a lot of bullshit in between. And this is where things, they get a little silly because, most people, of course, love playing arcade fighting games for the story. I don't understand this at all. Arcade fighting games like Mortal Kombat, like Street Fighter or any SNK game out there, they're pretty much, the idea is you sink quarters into them and they're very technical and that's what they're about. It's about the technical, but for some reason, people always complain about the video game movies. Oh, video game movies are so bad. And I think part of the reason why is because inexplicably over the course of 30 years or so, Hollywood has decided that the best kind of video games to adapt into films are, in fact, fighting games, which have either no story or just completely stupid fucking stories. So everything from, multiple Street Fighter movies to the aforementioned Mortal Kombat movies to anime series and cartoons and live action TV shows, and there's a Dead or Alive game, and there's is there a Dead or Alive movie? Is there a Fatal Fury movie? Probably. I don't know.
Anime movie.
Sure. See, name a fighting game, and you could probably point to at least 2 cartoons and a live action film that is somehow attached to it. And this is the world that we live in. And that brings us to Mortal Kombat, which I don't know if this is really in defense of Mortal Kombat, but unlike games like Street Fighter, where the story is largely an afterthought, because, Street Fighter has shipped games without competent story modes at all, and sometimes babies cry about it, but really that's not the point. Mortal Kombat has a lot of story going on. Whether or not that story is good is kind of up for debate. And after learning about what has happened since the last time I was fully invested in a Mortal Kombat game, there's a lot of story going on. But we should probably start at the beginning of our Mortal Kombat journey, which brings us to the original Mortal Kombat from 1995. And this is great because I personally love the movie Enter the Dragons, and at the time I loved Mortal Kombat, so why not just bolt Mortal Kombat onto Enter the Dragon? And that's pretty much it. Am I missing anything here, Jack?
Yes.
Go on.
Oh no, I have to clarify some stuff now. Jeez, okay, so Mortal Kombat 95, what is it? It's a Paul W.S. Anderson movie, which really means it's barely even a Mortal Kombat movie. I feel like it's really just been subsumed into his work of kind of hyper active, imaginative, somewhat insane, camp adjacent action cinema. Yeah, I don't know. It's a strange kind of a production because it's not hugely budgeted. Mortal Kombat was huge at the time, but video games, it being huge in the 90s as a video game was very different than now. I don't know. The whole industry has changed. Back then, still in the 90s, you could make a huge video game. It would be like 6 people, 2 guys that program it, 4 artists. That's it. Everyone else in the credits is pretty much just in like localization. It's changed now. Now you have like just hangars full of programmers working on contracts getting fired twice a day. It's a remarkable thing. But yeah, this movie is it's okay. It's fun, I guess. You have to approach it in a certain mindset. It's kind of a peculiar mix of things. It's hard for me to get, is this a good adaptation or not? I don't know, because Mortal Kombat, the original games, it was always difficult to balance. The big thing about them was like they're really violent and excessive, but the graphics didn't really support that, so they looked goofy as shit. But I don't know if they were intended to be goofy. And this movie is definitely very openly goofy. So I think that probably pissed some people off at the time, but honestly over time has, I think, really cemented the film's status as a kind of a camp classic, honestly. A kung fu camp classic.
Yeah.
Jack, may I interject by saying that, like, one in the follow-up to Mortal Kombat's success, the developers took the time to add in some guy popping in the corner yelling toasty,
yes,
and also things like babalities and animalities. I tend to think that the tone is appropriate here.
Okay, that's there's some stupid shit in there, certainly, but you know, it was to me Mortal Kombat, and I'm going to clarify. Okay, for me, Mortal Kombat is Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3. Played those growing up. Nothing else happened. As far as I'm concerned, the video game just ended there. There are no additional Mortal Kombats. That seems a fair thing. If you disagree, feel free to tell someone. I don't know. But yeah, for me it was always like you get it and you get the code for the blood, and there was the big hubbub about, you know, like, which funnily enough is really funny because it was only in America, but like it was exported as like spectacle because America's, that's what they do, is like they invent moral panics and then they export them as entertainment to other countries who look and it's like, gosh, this seems real complicated to be an American. And now, you know, and they were like, is this too violent? And it's like a movie, it's like, is this too extreme for our children? And it's like literally a video game where when you punch someone in the head, a dollop of blood the size of their head falls out and instantly disappears, and like politicians were literally like, will this be the downfall of society in a country where you can buy a gun at Walmart? It's just a phenomenal kind of a setup. It was the Brady Bill years, man. Yeah, well, you know, it's like, but this is very camp. It's very silly. And I mean, I get, you know, the Street Fighter movie did the same thing, but the Street Fighter movie did have the like added problem that there was no real established storyline for Street Fighter, so they just had to kind of wing it. Mortal Kombat has this grand epic narrative about various realms competing in a fighting contest. And having watched all of these in quick succession, I've really grown to appreciate that every time they try and explain what Mortal Kombat is about, and every one of the movies tries to do this, it never makes sense. Fundamentally, Mortal Kombat is just a terrible idea. Like, they didn't nail down the basics. It's just dumb as shit. And this movie kind of rolls with that pretty well, and it's mostly just like funny colored gels on the screen and techno music.
Mm-hmm.
Jack, what you need to realize is that the Mortal Kombat world is really just like our own, except without the letter C.
That is true.
That's the primary difference between the Earth realm in Mortal Kombat and Earth itself. Like, where they're not the same thing, which is what a lot of people think. Colin, I'm going to let you clarify all this here.
I'm about to explode because I have answers.
Everything I've said is accurate.
No. It's but you have but a lot of the things that were incorrect were more questions, and you even said to yourself like, I'm not sure about that, but I can answer that. You know what? Give me 3 minutes. This is all I need. Okay, so like, if you understand the way that cinema to home media works, that's how it used to be back in the day. If you're a younger listener, there was the arcade, there was home consoles, right? So it would premiere in the arcade, it would get a lot of attention, and then it would end up on home consoles, right? If you own the arcades, that was great, because you're kind of like doing double booking right there. So if you were like Namco or Sega, you could afford to do these crazy arcade gimmicks, like, you know, things that would spin around and different kind of controllers, you know, things to compete with at home. But if you didn't have that gimmick, you would have to lean into, you know, kind of cheaper things. And one of those approaches was digitization, which Midway took over. Midway is the people that made Mortal Kombat. Previous to that, if you've ever heard of Midway, it's probably because they imported Pac-Man, a Pole Position, fucking Space Invaders. They imported all of that shit to America, and then they would go on the news, you know, and there'd be some fucking anchor like with a microphone, and he'd be like, yep, it took us a while to make the games, but it wasn't that hard. You know, like just lying and whatever. That was Midway. So flash forward like 20 years, right? Midway is now established as like the kind of Western video game arcade developer that will push the edge. They'll do things like Smash TV. They'll do things like Spy Hunter, and they take genre and they put it into video games, and they'll make it like explosively violent. And that's something that you really can't get at home at this point. You know, at home you can play games, but they're not as violent, they're not as gory because there's limitations because Nintendo has to approve things. In the arcade, if some guy says, "Yeah, okay, it's putting in quarters," that's good enough. And that's when Mortal Kombat shows up, because it's trying to compete with Street Fighter. Street Fighter is a brand new fighting game. It's getting a lot of attention. So they rip that off. They make Mortal Kombat. There's only like 4 guys involved, and they're all basically just like, you know, addicted to Diet Coke and coding and making sound.
So are you telling me I overestimated the staff of Mortal Kombat by 2?
It was 4 guys.
Because I said 6.
Yes, it was 4 people. And I really want people to appreciate this, because as time has gone on, Mortal Kombat just seems to be this property, but it really was an independent production, at least in spirit, not really in funding, because like I said, Midway might have been scrappy, but they still had a lot of money. But the reason people were freaking out about this game, more so than Street Fighter, was because they were taking pictures of people and putting them in the game. So before there was like 3D bump mapping, you know, before there was ray tracing, you're putting real people in the game. That's a huge deal, and it looked really good. And even with the blood, like, you're seeing a real person's head ripped off. That's so much more extreme, isn't it? You know, and so that's what led to Nintendo refusing to put blood in their game, which helped Sega sell more consoles, which made Nintendo lean over to their political friends, which made them go in front of the congressional hearing. Like, it's a lot more complicated than, you know, the game did well, so America freaked out. It's like Nintendo was like, oh shit, what are we going to do? So they got their buddy Howard Lincoln, who used to be a lawyer, to go in front of Congress and be like, we don't know what's happening.
I actually have a question about the Nintendo version of Mortal Kombat. As Jack mentioned, you know, we have people freaking out, like politicians, over the fact that, you know, you have gushing blood everywhere.
Yeah, Herb Cole and Joseph Lieberman.
In the Super Nintendo version, you had just like geysers of gray blood, which they called sweat. And I was wondering if anyone was concerned about the level of dehydration experienced by people, and did they think that young people would perhaps violently dehydrate themselves at any point?
There'd be a Gatorade tie in there for certain.
Honestly, it's a more legitimate concern, I would think.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's hard to, lose that much blood, but you can lose a lot of sweat, man. If you're not, you got to hydrate.
Either way, the reason why this ended up being a movie more than other things at the time really was because it was like a major American success, which made it so much easier than having to fly over to Japan and have to negotiate, which, that was always really complicated anyway, and the results were terrible. Everyone can agree this actually had people that were involved in it. And when you think about it, you had people in a room sewing up costumes. You have these 4 people together sewing up costumes, having actors put them on and pretend fighting. Is it really that difficult to imagine that they're going to go into a really low budget film and say, hey, you might want to dim the lighting here to make this look cool? Why don't you add a rotating fan? And it's it's cheap shit, but it looked like the movie looks good. It looks cheap, but it looks good for looking cheap. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Either way,
yeah.
Midway fucked up. They invested too much fucking money in the wrong areas. Eventually, they went bankrupt. Warner Brothers purchased Mortal Kombat and most of the Midway properties. That's why this other version of Mortal Kombat got rebooted. You didn't much in the 3D era. It was really boring. It was more about kart racing and puzzles and lots of mini games. It really wasn't Mortal Kombat for a while, even though it was fun. But then when WB bought them, they said, no, we want you to make Mortal Kombat. Make it as violent as you want. And
then we got Freddy Krueger. Freddy Krueger in the Mortal Kombat games.
to its successor, to its detriment, it remains as hyper-violent now, even more so to the point where people had to leave the studio because they were getting PTSD, allegedly. That's how they said it. They said they were experiencing nightmares of violence from the things that they were using as reference.
That's bullshit. That's like the Heath Ledger fucking Joker role killed him. No fucking way.
Yeah, that does sound like marketing materials.
But regardless, the big important thing about all of this is that Warner Brothers really funded the franchise for the first time. Before, they were the cash cow for Midway, which is why it got so cheap. Now they were being funded in a real way to make a good fighting game and have a good story and just make a good game instead of having to be like, oh boy, are we going to help the entire company stay afloat next year? That's insane. That's a totally different level of pressure. So... yeah. This more recent Mortal Kombat is sort of a refined and I'd say a more focused version. Everything in the 3D era, just ignore that. And the first 3, I'm with you, Jack. They're the only real ones. In fact, part 3, that can kind of go away. Me and part 1 and part 2 are going to hang out in the forest with the screaming trees.
I will say, out of all 3 of these movies, Paul W.S. Anderson's Mortal Kombat is one where it's simple enough. It's smart enough to keep a lid on as much of its own bullshit as humanly possible. It's also the one Mortal Kombat movie where I think you could walk in without any experience, knowing what Mortal Kombat is, other than in the broadest cultural sense of it's the violent fighting game, and kind of understand what's going on. It does have the fan service moments, and it references different points in the game. But honestly, the stuff that Paul W.S. Anderson does, it plays to his strengths as well, because it's completely just bonehead stupid as far as movies go. But it has a template because it follows Enter the Dragon pretty much to a T. And it's got some goofy, flashy moments that really stick out. So, for instance, the Scorpion Johnny Cage fight, which features a burning skull. A skull that's on fire will always be cool. That's just a rule of life.
That scene was not in the original cut. They actually had to, they screened it and they thought they needed more fights, so they put that in there or something. It was not as it was, them going into that dimension.
Oh.
Wasn't in there or something.
I also think that Johnny Cage kind of got hosed because up until that point, everybody was fighting in we're going to fight on the beach in the sand pit. We're going to fight in the normal tournament fighting ring. And then Johnny Cage has to walk into the fucking woods and some guy shoots a rope out of his hand, and then he has to go to hell and fight among a skeleton pit. I don't think that was very fair at all.
What is he shooting out of his hand exactly? Like a fucking dino or something? It's
hard to tell.
Like bird knife.
It's hard to describe. Yeah, just how ridiculous
bird knife.
Composited digital effects.
Why is that your question out of this whole movie? What's Scorpion shooting out of his hand? What's anyone shooting out of their hand?
What's up with bird knife?
You think they'd just be shooting a fucking chain? Isn't it just a chain? Why does he make everything sentient? It's just a lot of strange choices.
Magic.
He was in Pee-wee's Playhouse.
I mean, basically.
I would agree. I think, like what I think is great about this and the Scorpion Johnny Cage fight is probably the highlight of the film for me. And it kind of cemented for me what I realized that this is a movie that's it's a production design movie. Like, it's not heavily budgeted, but it's really well realized in terms of the nuts and bolts of where they are. I think they shoot in Thailand. They have use a lot of scenic locations, and then everywhere else they go, it's just interesting. The sets look interesting. The costumes are a little dubious. I feel like it's kind of like a running thing through the Mortal Kombat thing. Like Colin mentioned, the idea that they actually made like costumes for the people, but they digitized it down, so it kind of was less apparent how frankly shitty the costumes are. But then when you move it back into the movie world, it becomes really evident. And by the time we get to Mortal Kombat Annihilation, it's like Halloween City sponsored the entire enterprise. Like, there's just a powerful cosplay vibe at work. But but the sets are pretty great. And Paul W.S. Anderson, he's still figuring out, I think, his editing schema. I'm not a huge fan even now, and I think I'm one of those people who's come around on Anderson's work. I think he's made a couple of legitimately great films. I mean, Resident Evil Retribution is frankly a masterpiece of action cinema. It's a tremendous
I'm gonna
film.
take your word for that.
It's tremendous. It's a really brilliant piece of work. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately for me, I enjoy the Resident Evil series. I think most of the rest of them are also commendable in one way or another. But if you are in any way not inclined towards the franchise, you do have to watch 4 films or so to get to that one. So that's probably a burden you probably don't want to take on. But he's still working out the action choreography in this is sloppy as hell. It's really slow.
Oh yeah.
Half the casting is, particularly the female casting, these women look like they have never formed a fist, let alone are Earth's greatest champions. They just look wholesale out of place. And funny, they can't stunt double them because they've picked people like what's her name? I don't know, Pete Sampras's wife, Bridget Nielsen, but it's not Nielsen. She's the Danish girl. Wilson. That's the Bridget Wilson Sampras.
Bridget Nielsen, Flavor Flav's wife.
Oh man, that would be a different movie. Like she's like this class thing. They hired her because she's like just very traditionally pretty, and she's very thin and slender and small, and she doesn't look like a fighter, and she's hard to double in for stunts because honestly anyone who's a stunt person isn't built like her either, so they have to shoot everything with her, and it's just really, really dumb. The fights are just leaden paced and full of really awkward, it's mostly people flipping. Like it's like Power Rangers, but like a step lower than Power Rangers. And this is a feature film that can't aspire to like bare bones Japanese television standards, which is really saying something. But it works. It's good fun. It's this, and the techno on top. I don't know, for anyone who really dislikes this, I just wonder what the hell they're really looking for. Unless they're like really diehard advocates, like, no, the movie was like, or the game was like really serious and they betrayed it. And I don't even know if those people exist, to be honest.
Yeah, I would hope not. And the thing is too, like you said, I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and defend, the formal sensibilities of one Paul W.S. Anderson. But I will say that my opinion of him, which used to be like just strong negative, it's softened quite a bit because, I don't always love what he's doing, but he's always going for it. He's always going 110%, and he's certainly going for it here. That's for sure. And like you said, it's cheap, but it's sloppy. But it at least knows what it is. And given the casting choices and various other problems that it has, it does the best with what it has. And it's fun. It's goofy. It's techno music. Again, there's a skull on fire. Fuck you if you don't like this movie. And, and I think the biggest name in the whole film, hilariously, is one Christopher Lambert, who is, I don't know, how many years removed from Highlander at this point?
But he's not bored. He's into it.
No, he's into it. He's
giving a very bizarre performance, frankly, where he just like keeps bursting into laughter like at random times throughout the thing.
It's like, was there a joke? Did I miss something? No, he's all over the place, goofy, but he's into it. Like, he's not phoning it in. So there's something here. If you don't like this movie, you don't like fun. I'm sorry. And Colin, I may have introed you as a giant nerd, but the true giant nerds are the people who, they watch something like the Mortal Kombat movie from 1995 and they cannot find any joy in it. Those people are nerds. They deserve scorn, not you, Colin. And I apologize.
Did they miss the reptile scenes? Because how could you not get joy out of these
seriously.
fucking things?
But let's talk about that for a second. That when you talk about scenes, what you're talking about are the enemies that they're fighting or their deaths. And I think it's crucial to understanding why this movie works. Here's all the characters. They're going to fight. One of them's dead. The end. Great. That's Mortal Kombat. Yeah. That's what the kids want. You'd think they'd be like, why would you kill off Scorpion? Because Scorpion dies every night that I play Mortal Kombat. They all do. That's the fun of it. You have to let the world be fragile and explode. And at the end of the day, it makes Johnny Cage cooler than he was in the games because he gets over, because he actually kills Scorpion. That's a pretty big deal. Liu Kang and Sonya, I forget who she kills Sub-Zero and he kills Reptile, I think. It's just a cool story. It works. It takes the enemies and it whittles them down to their powers, which are their most identifiable traits, and it emphasizes all these other more human characters. Smart. That's how you make it. And a fighting tournament.
It seems very odd to praise a film for having characters from a fighting game fight each other and kill each other.
That's it.
But I am praising it for that because of the vast quantity of movies that have fucked up this super simple goddamn
It's a very simple premise. And again, like, if we were to go through the list of video or film adaptations of fighting video games, it would be, probably upwards of like 30 movies, and this includes like live action and animated features, but the number of those that are actually about like people coming together and fighting in a tournament one-on-one, that is rare. That's the great white buffalo of this subgenre. So,
which is so insane. How hard is that to fucking execute?
Yeah.
Jesus.
So what's the game about? Well, you can see like, people hate the Super Mario Brothers movie, and it's like, well, what's Mario about? I don't know, man. It's this fucking guy, and he's collecting stuff, and he jumps on people, and it's weird. But this is very simple. Okay, yep. And the giant scrolling text in the beginning, it lays it out for us. This realm, blah, 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 every 50 years, generation, blah, blah, blah. They got to fight. They got to have a tournament. They fight. And if the bad guys win, they get to invade Earth and enslave Earth. So the good guys have to win. Great. Easy. Simple. Street Fighter. There's a tournament. Everybody comes together. They kick each other's ass. And the winner is crowned the World Warrior Tournament Champion. All of this is simple.
Dude, UFC exists. People understand the idea of fighting tournaments and people winning fights. These are normal ideas. For some reason, these movies treat these like these are really insane concepts. Like, a fight is when two individuals or more disagree physically.
Well, it's bizarre too, because you're coming off of like 2 decades of action films where this would be an acceptable setup for a simple low budget action film, where it's just like, this guy's gonna enter a karate tournament. Will he win or will he lose? And then when they get into the 90s and they have these properties they want to adapt, they like totally forget that this is a way you can approach a low budget action movie. And they're just like, no, how about if we make it about a dictator? Like, what the fuck?
The Street Fighter movie is a great example. It's like, okay, so Jean-Claude Van Damme did Bloodsport, which is why you hired him for the lead role in Street Fighter, and somehow you did not just mimic Bloodsport. I don't fucking understand that.
I just have to put in so no one screams in the comments, but yes, Jean-Claude Van Damme was originally supposed to be in a video game by Midway, which he turned down eventually. It was supposed to rip out Bloodsport, but because he did not appear, it became Mortal Kombat. There. Someone else will point it out.
So there's the Johnny Cage connection, frankly. Could have been Jean-Claude Van Cage. But yeah, it's one thing. You guys are like, it's really straightforward. It's a tournament. We have to fight and we have to win. But to be fair, as I mentioned earlier, really Mortal Kombat's never about the tournament, and this is telling because this is out of 4 Mortal Kombat movies. Is there 3? We're at 4. That's right. I've lost count because there's the animated one as well. Out of 4 of them, this is the only one that even actually takes place during a tournament. Mortal Kombat insists on being about the geopolitics behind the tournament. And then when they try and explain why the tournament's even happening, it doesn't make any sense, because it's like the Elder Gods created multiple realms, and then apparently the realms are all going to eat each other, so they decided they should fight each other once every 50 years, which seems, I don't know, the Elder Gods 50 years seems like real quick turnaround for this. To just, and if they win 10 times, then they get to, one realm gets to absorb the other. It's like, what's the point of this? And it's like, it's all about balance. It's like, it isn't though. This doesn't make any goddamn sense. And then basically it's just about one realm that cheats endlessly, and the Elder Gods go like, we can't get involved. It's like, so why have a tournament? Why do you care? Why did you create these ones and not want them to invade each other? And why is everyone so horned up for Earth Realm? No one's in, like, there's only 3 realms we're aware of that I'm aware of, right? You have Earth Realm, which is Earth, and then you have, which is presumably is Earth and all of the universe around it, and then you have another realm which is Outworld, which is the main adversary, and Outworld is noted in the, I can't remember which movie describes it, just says it's the most violent realm. That's all we know about Outworld. It's a very violent place. And then you have the Nether realm, which is, I guess, somewhere near the Taint realm. I don't know. And they just, I
think it's like just the underworld essentially, right?
Yeah.
It's just like the afterlife.
Yeah, but if they say it's
called
a realm,
it's a separate realm.
It's a realm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, good question. Maybe it is. Maybe everyone, when they die, they go to the Nether realm, because the Nether realm seems to snap up enough people. Not entirely sure though, and they have their own leadership, and they seem like they want to take over Earth realm too. So what the fuck's that about?
Jack, I want to say you're not wrong.
Sure.
You're not wrong at all. This is entirely what Mortal Kombat is doing, but why? That's the question. I'm looking at it from the perspective of a movie producer, and I'm trying to market it to this certain demographic. And being part of that demographic, I didn't fucking have any idea about all this nonsense when I was firing up Mortal Kombat on the Genesis. Like, nobody cares.
But they keep
you're just trying
explaining
to
it.
strip it the fuck down to spare parts and just make it into a simple goddamn
But they keep
movie.
trying to talk about this. Is what I don't understand is we're 4 movies in and all of them want to bring up this shit, and it's just shut up. Just do the tournament, and they won't.
Yes.
And it's
Exactly.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, that's it. Also, this knowledge that I never wanted to have, but now have. Turns out there's 8 realms. So we got Earth Realm, Outworld. Okay.
No,
we've got Nether Realm. We've got Edenia, which makes sense because we learn about that in Mortal Kombat Annihilation. It's like a throwaway line because the prince, queen, whatever. Then there's Chaos Realm.
Chaos.
Yeah.
Fuck's sake. Is that more violent
there's Chaos
than
Realm,
Outworld?
there's Order Realm. I don't. Who could
No,
say?
I think
I'm not looking into
was
this.
like a peaceful realm. It was like an Earth realm type thing until Shao Kahn took it over. As for Chaos Realm, I've never. I've watched way too much in preparation for this, and I've never heard that mentioned a single fucking time. So
let me tell you about Order Realm, which I guess that's Chaos Realm's boring cousin. Heaven, which you may have heard of, and then something called just Ashtek. Don't know what that is. Doesn't even have realm in the name. Not interested.
I thought that was part of Outworld because in the later games, the Kotal Khan he's an Ashtek person, but he's just an Outworld resident.
Look at this conversation that we're having. I'm just telling you what a wiki says. I don't give a fuck about any of this, to be honest. But okay, what we're talking about how essentially the idea of Mortal Kombat should be simple, but somehow they have to complicate it. Also, I love how the games immediately wrote themselves into a corner, because instead of saying that like this tournament has to happen every year or every 5 years or maybe even every decade, to be consistent and have characters who can, easily move from sequel to sequel to sequel forever, they decided to have a 50-year window, which that kind of fucks you up, and that's where the story gets real weird real quick. But that brings us to Mortal Kombat Annihilation, which happens 2 years later is a direct sequel, as in it picks up exactly where the original Mortal Kombat film leaves off. But, and keep in mind, Mortal Kombat 1995, pretty low budget film. Mortal Kombat Annihilation made with what I can only assume is 1/10 the budget, and most of the lead actors, the principal cast, replaced completely. I think Liu Kang returns, and how many other people? Not many, right?
Talisa Soto also, Kitana returns.
Oh, Kitana.
I think that's
Princess
it.
Kitana. Okay, but that's it. So we have an entire new cast here, including the addition of Shao Kahn, who's like the real big bad. Played by Brian Thompson, who you may remember as the baddest motherfucker alive. He was in Cobra as the guy who like banged axes together and he had like an axe gang. Very
iconic
cool
role.
He was in Hired to Kill. Brian Thompson, greatest of all time. Okay,
I think he was probably best known in 1997 as like, at least to the people who were going to see Mortal Kombat Annihilation, for his role in the X-Files, I would imagine. He was like the lunky alien bounty hunter.
Oh, so you're claiming he wasn't known for his appearance in Nico Masterax's In the Cold of the Night, the greatest erotic thriller of the early 1990s?
Well, I just see Brian Thompson, I just think of erotic.
We
He's
all
definitely
do,
the most
Adam.
erotic man.
And honestly, this movie doesn't change that for me.
Yeah,
I didn't
absolutely.
watch it. I avoided it. And I will never watch this movie. I mean, I promised a long time ago not to watch this film because I've seen too many reviews of it. I've seen too many things of it. I've seen too many screenshots. I swore a long time ago I'd avoid it. Tell me what happens.
We commend you then for preparing properly for the podcast.
Yes, absolutely. It does have a higher budget. You said a budget, a 10%? No, it actually, I believe the other one was 20 million. This one was 30 million.
Well, I don't know where it went. Cocaine is the only option
I think
for where that other 10 million went.
Yeah, possibly.
Just tell me the story.
Embezzlement, yeah.
There is no story.
Ponzi schemes.
There must be.
Yeah.
How long's the movie? It has to have a story. They wouldn't just put bullshit on the screen
It's
for 2 hours.
several minutes long. There's a lot of your favorite characters show up. But what is the story? The story of this one is basically that Outworld continue to cheat because Earthrealm are suckers and Raiden is the dumbest motherfucker of them all who won't do anything right. So basically Outworld cheat and they invade Earth. They just show up. And they're just like, you know what? We're just gonna wreck stuff, and they punch some shit in Thailand, like statues and whatnot. But nothing sacred, because actually in the end credits, I think of this one, there's actually a little note saying that they did not destroy any religious idols, in a mark of respect and gratitude to the people of Thailand, which I thought was nice and pretty cool of Outworld, honestly. So yeah, because to be fair, this is a good idea because later on, pretty soon after that, Ong Bak and the career of Tony Jaa would teach us that if you mess with the idols of Thailand, you will get your head crushed with elbows. And so, unfortunately, nothing like that happens here. It's incredible to learn that this has a higher budget, and the only explanation is it has a bigger cast because everything else in it looks like crap. This is actually, I heard somewhere this is something that's kind of gone around. This is actually an unfinished film. What happened apparently was that they made the movie, and then they wanted to show it at a film festival. I forget which one, but it's like a midnight showing at a film festival. So they rushed to cut for that. And so you had a midnight screening with just a crowd of people drinking, showing up for a Mortal Kombat movie. Like basically the most amenable crowd possible to enjoy your film, right? And guess what? They enjoyed the movie. They had a great time. You know, why wouldn't you? You're probably, taking a little vacation at your film festival. It's a midnight screening. You've had a couple of beers, bunch of people punching each other. It's funny, right? The director wants to finish it. So there's all these placeholder special effects in it. There's some editing gaffes and stuff that the director wanted to polish off. But the studio basically saw that there was a positive crowd reaction and figured, why spend any more money on this? Apparently they spent 30 million already. Okay, why would you? So they just decided to release it. Yes, they released it as is. You will notice when this movie opens, there's an incredible amount of computer graphics of like swirling vortexes in the background, like kind of like these swirling interdimensional portals, and you can clearly see the digital seams in them, like literally, like it's like looking at like a Doom 3D like ceiling texture. This whole thing just looks amateurish as hell. The costuming, like I mentioned, like genuinely looks like Halloween, like you buy it at a Walmart, or a Walgreens for your kid, just like a weird, like everyone's just wearing like a leotard with a cape. That's everything. And then everything else is just kind of worse too. However lacking the action choreography was in the first one, they didn't fix it here, that's for sure. And then they talk more.
All I care about are my bros. I just want to say, what's up, Johnny Cage? That's one reason I want to check out this movie. Another reason I want to check out Sonya Blade. Wasn't a huge fan of her, honestly, but she killed Sub-Zero, so she must be like pretty big deal.
I've got good news for you, Colin. Great news for you. Okay, so Johnny Cage, he dies 3 minutes in. Gone.
What? Why?
Get rid of him.
But why
Fuck
did
him.
they... Well, that's okay. They must have scorpions back then, right?
I don't remember. Is he?
No, he is not.
He's not.
No, you get Sub-Zero, you don't get Scorpion.
Meanwhile, Sonya, new actress. Pete Sampras's wife did not come back. She was not interested. She probably had to do like a part in Seinfeld or something. That's where every pretty woman in the 90s eventually ended up for one episode. So, she's gone. They got a different actress who honestly is probably better, but it doesn't really matter at this point. It's
interchangeable.
It doesn't matter. They have loads of new characters. You've got Shiva, you've got Ermac, you've got seriously, Noob Saibot shows up. The guy whose name is literally the creator's names backwards, and he becomes a real character in the movie. Like that, they didn't change that. This is just just a shit show from start to finish.
Baraka's in it for 10 seconds. Don't forget that. That's important.
Yeah, Shiva dies super quickly. It's very clearly that that's not how she was meant to die. And then a cage falls on her and she's just gone. She just disappears. They're done with it. The money ran out there. I do want to say though, just to clarify, if I sound like I'm being mean and negative about it and saying everything's shit, everything in this movie absolutely is shit. But honestly, like for the people who are like, this is one of the worst movies ever made, I'm not even sure this is the worst Mortal Kombat movie, frankly. This is fine. The stakes are way too low this to be a really bad movie. It's kind of fun. It's really, really stupid and it looks like crap. And honestly, that's kind of fun, So yeah, I take this over any Marvel movie, frankly.
Okay.
Absolutely, 100%. And listen, this is important. This is very important. It does exactly what Mortal Kombat the game was doing at the time too. So if you're playing Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, shit is getting cheaper and goofier, and suddenly there's like as many little rectangle boxes that they can fit on the screen to put a character's face in. There's a character. So we've gone from like the yellow ninja and the blue ninja to here is every color of the rainbow ninja. There's a guy named Rain. There's a ninja named Rain. Come on. It's just all
smoke.
Everyone. And then they're like, okay, well, we've run out of colors for the ninjas. They're like, well, what if we reuse the colors, but now they're robots and also ninjas? Great, throw them in there. And all of these guys are in Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Everyone is in this film for exactly 5 minutes, okay? This is We Are the World, but for Mortal Kombat fighting fans. They're all there. And it's goddamn hilarious.
It sounds like a cosplay snuff film is what it sounds like.
It's wonderful because they're trying to do is, we gotta stop Shao Kahn, which is this like nebulous idea that no one really moves towards any sort of resolution on.
And it turns out we need to stop his dad, who's I don't think is even in the franchise larger, but anyway, so be it.
No, his dad is just in a Spirit Halloween role.
It's fucking Shinnok, which is not have anything to do with the father of Shao Kahn. But in this movie, Shinnok is Shao Kahn's father, and Raiden is also Shinnok's son. They're brothers.
Adam, everyone knows Shinnok is Lord of the Nether Realm.
I guess. I don't know. Shinnok is now in Outworld, not the Nether Realm. He's Outworld, and he's the papa of Raiden and Shao Kahn, even though that's not accurate in any way. But who gives a fuck?
Who gives a fuck in this movie? Exactly.
But the first 10 minutes of this movie must be said, it's like a visual masterpiece. Like I could, my jaw was on the ground. I was like, this could not possibly, that number of $30 million, I don't even care about embezzlement. It's just a lie. It's horseshit. Whatever's being said here, fuck you. You didn't have $30 million to make this. If you did, then you are the greatest of all buffoons.
There's just lobster and caviar on the craft table for the whole thing.
Yeah, I could not fathom that this could possibly have been a theatrical release just in the first 10 minutes. After that, it gets to be just, standard kind of dumb bullshit. But the first 10 minutes are like footage from the first film with like these new characters horribly overlaid on top, and that spinning skybox thing is also overlaid on there, and it is the most work print looking shit you'll ever see in your life.
It's really dark too.
Yeah, imagine you're a fan and you want to check out this movie, and all the movie critics say it's bad, all the fans say it's bad. I don't recall seeing any trailers for this. The reason I didn't see it wasn't because I was like, oh, I'm going to avoid it. I didn't even know it existed. They tried to hide this fucking thing. The first movie was everywhere.
It was number one at the box office the first week that it came out. It somehow, and then it immediately tanked.
Yes.
Immediately. But I think anyone who just outwardly, I hate this movie. No, fuck you. It is again, in the formal sense, this is not a good film in any way, shape, or form. But it's so uniquely stupid in its construction and ridiculously cheap looking. And it's everything from the effects, the practical effects, the CGI, the green screen work. The stunt doubles are horrible. Everything is bad. There are moments in this movie where I had to stop and think about what I was seeing and just pause the movie for a second to make sure that I was processing everything right. There's a wonderful, wonderful scene that illustrates this about an hour in. So our heroes had just gotten to Outworld, and Sindel or whatever shows up, and she's got her ninja minions that are just solid blob CGI things that move out of a wall, clearly unfinished. Okay, and you're like, all right, sure. So then Raiden decides, he's like, I'll take on the minions. You guys do some stuff, and we're treated to this 5-minute, poorly choreographed, obvious stunt double, shit-ass fight scene. It's fine. It's great. There's techno music. Absolutely loved it. And then afterwards, because, Sindel is introduced to us, and you're like, oh, man, there's going to be a big fight with her and the other guys. It's going to be this whole thing. And I thought it was going to be a section where we were going to see, that fight kind of interspliced with Raiden's fight. They're going to go back and forth. It's going to be this whole thing. Because that's how a more traditional film would have handled this. Instead, Raiden beats up the ninja CGI minions, and then the rest of the group shows up, and they go... And then Raiden goes, well, how did Queen Sindel go? And they're like, wow, we really kicked her ass. I stuck up behind her. And they describe a fight that we did not see in more detail than you would expect. And then that's it. And all I was thinking was, is this what's his name? The guy that can shapeshift into different people. Not Shao Kahn, but Sang Sung. I was like, is this him? Is he pretending to be someone else? Have they been brainwashed? Because the whole thing, it doesn't fit the conventions of cinematic storytelling or there's nothing logical or normal about it. It's just fucking weird. And then you come to realize, no, this movie's just really fucking stupid, and that was really fucking weird, and you're just going to have to accept it. And that is Mortal Kombat Annihilation. It's wonderful. I love it.
I feel like if Paul W.S. Anderson's film has kind of come around to camp, it courted camp, and time has kind of cemented it, just really the 90s stylings. Techno was serious at the time, but it's kind of become campy, more attached to that. It was always a little adjacent. This movie is just straight up actual unfiltered camp, entirely by accident and just lack of they couldn't escape. They couldn't generate enough kind of charisma and inertia to escape from camp, so they're just stuck in there. and that's the movie. And it's frankly, like, if you watch the first 5 minutes of this and you're still on board, like, the whole thing, it's kind of fun. It's definitely not, it's not what it was meant to be, and even if it were, it would still be bad. But frankly, this is still, there's still quite a lot of fun to be had in this movie. And again, I think this is like Steve mentioned, this I think is quintessentially like the spirit of like Mortal Kombat 3, as just like something that clearly was put together with like several jugs of coffee and a weekend, and they were just like, we need to hit a deadline. And that's the movie, and that's the video game. You can't get a truer adaptation than that. Like, it really nails the spirit of the whole thing.
Absolutely. So if you enjoy seeing every single character, except for a few key ones that for some reason didn't show up, I mean,
they're probably
that's
dead.
It. It's like,
they're probably dead.
Take a shot every time a new character shows up. Do that game. Have fun.
You'd have liver failure about 15 minutes in, because and then again, like, things that you are taught from just watching movies repeatedly, like things that are visual cues or storytelling cues, they never pay off. It's incredible. There's no real narrative here. It's just sort of, it's different narrative threads that go nowhere, and they all are just kind of in this like fucking like Rat King ball, all tied up and messy. But yeah, I mean, God, like what's his face? Sub-Zero shows up, saves the day heroically saves the day, and you think, oh well, he's gonna play a crucial role in the rest of this film, and he says, go ahead and save, Princess Katana. I'll catch up with you later. And guess what? He does not catch up with us later. He is in fact gone after his 5-minute cameo. And that's what you see. Like, people, they show up and they either die or they say, yeah, catch you later, bro. And we catch no one later. No one is caught. It's just ongoing.
Also, everyone can travel around the world using like steam-powered hamster balls, which is important for literally one scene and then is never mentioned again.
and this is, and it's like explained like, oh, we'll use the fucking hamster tubes, hop in here, and there's a whole like travel scene, and they talk about it like, oh boy, haven't rode the hamster tubes in a while. It's like a whole later Raiden, we know, can just like zap you anywhere. That's kind of what he does. So you would think that would be more eloquent way of traveling, but no, we had to use hamster balls.
Maybe that's where the budget went. The fucking balls. Maybe the balls cost a tremendous amount of money, because that was all really early. I feel like I'm with you guys at the beginning of this movie. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is just top-notch lunacy, but then it starts to get pretty boring. It's like they run out of energy after the first half hours.
I mean, that's the same with like a lot of really low budget films. And you can almost say the same thing about another movie. Maybe a movie that's more recent. Or do you guys have to talk about those animated things?
Fuck the animated films. And Jack, I agree with you that the balls in Mortal Kombat Annihilation probably inspired Elon Musk's plans for American infrastructure.
And if it did indeed add just an insurmountable expense that collapsed the entire infrastructure of the film, that would also accurately inspire Elon Musk and his boring company. So, tremendous.
Mm-hmm. So, I guess the question is then, was it also an inspiration for Godzilla vs. Kong? Had a similar mode of transport for no reason.
That's true.
Here is the guidelines that we set, Colin.
Okay.
Which, as a guest, I'm sure you absorb completely.
Yeah.
We're covering the 3 mainline films here. Anything else is just for trying to understand the batshit lunacy that is the Mortal Kombat universe. But I mean, really, if you want to, if you're a real MK head, you can go out there and there's like, I don't know, there's like direct to video shit that's available. There's the cartoon series, the cartoon movie. There's a live action series. Mortal Kombat has, it's funny because the final thing we're going to talk about right now is, of course, the new Mortal Kombat, 2021 Mortal Kombat, and it's marketed as a reboot. But has Mortal Kombat ever left us in the world of film and television? Not really. It's kind of been floating around peripherally for a while. Now, this is obviously the big return to the theaters, but Mortal Kombat has not stopped. And, you know...
You sound mad about that. Mortal Kombat must be stopped, damn it.
I mean, part of me doesn't want it to because it is so stupid. I'm glad to have something this dumb in the universe, but maybe tone it down a bit in terms of like your output of it. Feels like they'll license this to anyone. You could be like, hey, I've got a great idea for a Quibi series. And they'll be like, Mortal Kombat. Ed Boon's like, write the check. I'll go do it. Just fucking pump the brakes.
I think we're pushing, like, because the reason to stop it is because now we're at a point where, because, okay, the 90s ones are just kind of childish and silly, and they're kind of fun and colorful, and they're pretty harmless, frankly. No one is worried about them undermining society. Just to briefly touch on Scorpion's Revenge, the animated movie, is kind of brings us into this new modern mode, which is basically that no one grew up, everyone's still a child, everyone loves cartoons, but cartoons can now include lots and lots of violence, and that's kick-ass cool, because everybody's a fucking man baby. And that's Scorpion's Revenge. It's literally just an, 80-minute long sequence of a bunch of people getting cut up, and if you think that's the coolest thing in the world, you'll love it, but it gets quite boring after literally 4 minutes, and nothing else happens after that. And now the movies have folded the two elements together in this new one in 2021. They folded together, isn't it cool that we can be violent, which is it could be cool if you put any effort into it, alongside of, isn't it cool that we don't have to light films anymore? And they folded those two together to create Mortal Kombat 2021, which is a very, very violent film shot mostly in, as far as I can tell, a dark gym. And that's Mortal Kombat 2021, and it's couldn't be further from the 90s films in terms of tone and spectacle. Yeah. But I will say again, I do believe this is probably the truest in spirit adaptation of a Mortal Kombat film, because I do genuinely believe that the four guys apparently, I think there's two main creators of Mortal Kombat, I do genuinely believe that they are absolutely fucking badass guys, kick each other's heads off and they rip their spines out. It's cool. And this movie is 100% channeling that energy. It's it's so badass. He's MMA and he kicks ass, and now wouldn't it be cool if in MMA you could punch people and their heads came off? And that's just that's the energy. But they also spend an inordinate amount of time once again explaining the tournament that firstly doesn't even fucking happen in this film, and secondly doesn't make sense. It still doesn't make any sense. And you know what? I'm the one of us who liked this movie the most. So work with that.
Yeah, that's what you have to work with.
I gotta say right off the bat, I hated this movie. And I didn't expect that. I went into this, I'm serious, just no expectations, just nothing. I was just gonna watch some movie, whatever. And the more I watched it, the more I just kind of got offended as a movie watcher. And then I remembered it was based off the games, and I got really mad. It's why does this exist? It just felt like a movie for no one. Neither the fans nor people that just want to go see a movie. It just felt like if you were just a fan, we're not going to get any of that right. And if you just want to watch a movie, haha, we got you, because we're going to have a sequel coming, because we're building a universe. You couldn't just watch a movie. It just felt like a gotcha either way.
Well, it's the rebirth. It's the Marvel disease that there are no movies anymore. There's just product lines, and it's just, this is just birthing a franchise. So this isn't a movie, really. This is just a teaser. It's a feature-length teaser for the next movie where stuff's really gonna happen. And then when that movie rolls around, it's just gonna be a teaser for the next movie, because it's just the Marvel syndrome. It's just hey, tune into this movie because we'll introduce what you can expect in the next movie. And that's and it's annoying. I gotta admit, this movie, it's not this movie didn't bother me that much. It does a couple of things right. The fight choreography's actually relatively okay throughout. It helps they've got Joe Taslim and a few other people who are actually able to fight. It's and also with an FX budget that actually allows it to do what none of the other ones could properly do, or could really indulge in, which is that it does marry the magicness of Mortal Kombat with the actual fighting, because that's always been an issue with the Mortal Kombat universe, is that in the video games everyone's shooting fire from their hands and flying, and then in the movies it's mostly two people just like trying to get in, like, you know, punching each other in the kidneys, and it's like, this is weird. And then they back away to do very clear like a special effects shot, and that's like the big crescendo of the battle. Whereas in this one, you know, with CGI they can integrate, you know, like Sub-Zero is like a living icicle, and everything he touches turns to ice, and it's kind of like surges through the battle and realized. And there's some interesting visual possibilities that are actually realized here that works, you know, with just an increased budget and kind of being able to build it from then up. But, you know, ultimately I thought this movie was okay to sit through, but yeah, it's kind of like it's totally insignificant, and it's not camp, so it's kind of very serious minded as it runs, which I don't know why anyone wants
and
that.
The Marvel touch point is important too, because again, like, the Marvel movies are exhausting, and they do what you're talking about, where same thing Mortal Kombat is doing. They're just kind of like setting up the next thing without getting to anything. Everything feels like it's just a prelude to something else that may or may not come. And that's important too, because in this era of kind of Marvel also rans, all these companies trying to do franchises that exist as whole universes, we don't know if we're ever getting the next thing. Okay, there was a Power Rangers movie in 2017. Are we getting another one? I don't fucking know. Possibly not. There's all these other things you look back at. Like, I think G.I. Joe is another good example where they try to create an entire universe around rebooting G.I. Joe for a new generation. And I think we got 2 of those and then nothing. So you don't ever know if any of this is going to pay off. And I'm guessing probably not, because there's rarely ever a good payoff, but you can sit through it. But then the more you think about it, and you think about what you love about Mortal Kombat, which is like well choreographed violence, a respectable level of camp goofiness that is engaging, and then these colorful characters that enrich that campy atmosphere, and somehow in a game that has had no less than probably 100 different characters, many of which are campy and weird and goofy as shit and fun or even interesting. God, there was a guy in Mortal Kombat who was just a fat man that barfed and farted. That could have been your main character here.
I knew you were going to bring him up. I just knew.
Yeah, because his name is like Rochambeau or something, and he just barfs and farts.
Bo Raicho.
Yeah, it's his name.
I was close. Okay, so but the point I'm getting at is the main character of Mortal Kombat 2021 is nothing. He's a cipher. He's a blank fucking canvas. And
he has a family.
He doesn't do anything.
He has a family.
He has a family.
He loves his family. We were discussing Out of Africa many, many years ago, and the trope for that was that Meryl Streep couldn't have children, and that was her entire defining characteristic. This man has successfully had a child, and he has a wife, and he loves them very much. And that's it. That's all he does. All he does is he loves his family. He just nothing else about him.
Well, that's the setup that they pitch these things on. And by these things, I don't mean Mortal Kombat. I mean every goddamn reboot of a nostalgia property that exists now is just kind of like, what if it was taking place in a grounded reality? And it's like, what makes this a grounded fucking reality? Because there's an MMA asshole with a fucking wife and kid? Who gives a shit? Like, it's just boring.
But there's a lot of different ways of doing that, where you can have things take place in a grounded reality. And my biggest issue
How about
with this
we never
movie,
do? Just get rid of it. I fucking live in a grounded reality. It's not that goddamn great.
But I'm just saying, like, if you wanted to try with this movie, they did it the entirely wrong way, because it feels neither real nor whimsical. It just feels like cautious of being too much of anything. It's just this neutered film that, I don't know, like, does it star any of the Mortal Kombat characters? No. Do they do any of their fatalities? One of them does, but not really. Do they have cool powers? No, they're learning them still. What? Like, no, then I don't want to see this. Flash forward 5 years. I'll check out that movie. Don't show me this fucking part. This is boring. What is this? Like, if you want to tell this universe, fine. but don't make me sit through this shit. That's what
I think they should embrace the social realism. Like, just, okay, so the next Mortal Kombat movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation 2023, Ken Loach is going to direct. It's going to be a gritty working class drama. I'm fine with that. But I mean, the way that they present things in this, like Jack said, the defining characteristic of our main character is he's a guy with a family, and that's it. There's nothing else to him. And then we find out that he's not even a good fighter. And the one thing he excels at is getting his ass kicked. And this ties into the plot because in order to defeat Outworld in Mortal Kombat, you have to unlock your Arcana, which is a new little twisteroo. Boo. So previously in Mortal Kombat, these were just guys who could do cool shit, okay? Liu Kang, why can Liu Kang throw a fireball out of his hands? Fuck you, it's because he's cool and that's what he does, and you'll accept that. And I did, and I still do, and that's fine. But here, we have to have an explanation for everything. So an Arcana is, if you're a Mortal Kombat guy, you have a special power, and the only way that you can access your special power is by unlocking it through, I don't even know what.
Going
like
Super Saiyan,
tapping
I guess.
into some, And the way that our shitty main character unlocks his Arcana is by getting his ass kicked, because that's the only thing he's actually good at. And when he gets his ass kicked enough, then he unlocks his Arcana, which is he's the exact same person he was before, but he kind of looks like Aquaman now because he's got a weird metal
he gets a
sheathy
suit
vest.
of armor to make him all the better equipped to get his ass kicked. I love it. Like, I do think it's pretty great. Like, that this dude's superpower is, as the Irish might say, to lie down under punches. That's his superpower, pretty much. It's just
they did a great job just giving him a fucking rubber suit, too, by the way. That clearly is, like, bending throughout the back.
It's super metal.
Hold on. But despite the budgets, we have to say that the scripts are good, because there's a point where they say, the villain tells him, you can either save the world or you could go home to your family or something. And he's like, oh, yeah. And so he runs home. Fucking movie. Colt, my favorite Mortal Kombat character.
Yeah, I have a lot of issues with this script. It's just not a very compelling movie. But this Arcana shit. This is an important point to me, because it's just. Again, we're trying to write for a grounded reality, I suppose, but this thing with the magic powers, it doesn't make any sense. What the fuck is Kung Lao's fucking Arcana? The hat throwing?
Hat.
Was he magically gifted a razor hat?
He can teleport in the games, kind of.
Yeah, but not in this. His Arcana is that he can throw a hat. And yeah, this is the same with Jax. That was a particularly egregious instance for me, because again, grounded reality.
God,
this guy Sub-Zero breaks his arms off, and the monks are tending to him. But he's one of these chosen fighters. He's going to get a magic power, and we as players of this video game series know that he's going to get big metal arms. So you're like, okay, his power is going to be that he gets super arms.
He's a size
but
queen.
Instead, in a grounded reality, with no weird tech elements whatsoever, for some reason these monks build him tiny skeletal robo prosthetics, and his superpower is instead of growing powerful arms, that he makes his tiny skeletal arms that were mysteriously gifted to him become larger and better at fighting.
Yeah,
Girthier.
Works for me. I will say, because this movie, it's dumb in a lot of ways, but I did overall, I enjoyed it. I think it's Mortal Kombat, so like the stakes are real low, frankly, and there's enough fighting in it, and there's some gore and stuff, and there's some bits of it like that's pretty okay. There are some really funny parts to this movie. A particular standout for me, I've talked a lot about how Mortal Kombat insists on explaining its lore, and its lore is literally the dumbest shit imaginable, and they've had years to fix this and they can't. So this movie once again is like, let's go over this one more time, but it chooses to do it in a really funny way. I don't know if they intended